Welcome, everybody. This is the Lehigh County Authority Board of Directors meeting of August 28th, 2023. This meeting is being held in a hybrid fashion with some board members present in the boardroom and others available online or on the phone through the Zoom. It's also available to the public as well. Follow us along. Let's begin the meeting with a roll call of Board of Directors.
Okay, roll call. Brian Noggle.
Here.
Amir Famili.
Here.
Ted Lyons.
Here.
Linda Rosenfeld.
Here.
Norma Cusick.
Here.
Kevin Baker. Jeff Morgan.
Here.
Sean Siller.
Here.
Mark Gramis. Mark, can you say that again? Make sure we can hear you.
Yes, here.
All right, we hear you. We have 8 board members present.
All right. Yeah. The information was sent out by staff to the board members via hard copy as well as electronically, and it's available on the website. Anybody else to review? And we're going to change the agenda to reflect the addition of the material that was hand delivered to the board. That's the capital plan for suburban division and administration. So that's the only change that was on the agenda. Let's see, let's review the agenda and see if there's any other changes.
There are no other changes for the agenda for today. However, staff is requesting a very brief executive session following the close of the regular meeting, pardon me, to discuss a security matter.
Okay, thank you. All right, let's move on to the approval of the minutes from the August 14th, 2023 board meeting.
I move that the minutes be approved.
And I'll make a second.
I think that was Sean saying that. Make the motion, second by Sean. Any questions? All in favor, say aye.
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 I abstain. I was absent.
All right, thank you very much. They're approved. At this point in time, we open up the floor to the public, to the comments, and now agenda items. Do you have any comments?
No, thanks, Brian.
No, thanks.
Lenny and Brian. All right, moving on then to action discussion items. We have 2 items under finance and administration. First one is suburban division preliminary 2024 to 2028 capital plan. It is a discussion. It is digital board package pages 7 through 72. And some white documents we have in front of us.
So for this one, we'll have another presentation similar to what we did last time. Chuck Volk is not in the office. He's on vacation, but he has dialed in. He was dialed in.
Yeah, he's there.
Where is he? I missed him.
There
There you are, Chuck. Hi. So Chuck is on the call to help us with the presentation, and hopefully his connection is good from whatever part of the world he's traveling from today.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank
Okay,
you.
excellent.
Sound check. So I will bring the presentation up and get us started and then turn over to both Ed and Chuck. Today, we are presenting the administration and suburban division capital plans. Last time, 2 weeks ago, we did the Allentown division. So there's a lot of meat, in both of these, in all of the plans. So that's why we separate them out and give us a chance to sort of absorb them separately. And I'm just going to go through a couple things. That we talked about last time about process, and I'll go through this quickly because we did cover it 2 weeks ago. Just as a reminder, the capital planning process is at the plan level, somewhat conceptual in terms of the projects and the programs that are proposed for the next 5 years, and approving the plan itself is not an approval of any funding for those plans. Or for those projects. We have a couple different ways that we get at the approvals. The annual budget, you'll see a 1-year funding approach for capital in the budget process. We also see lots of project-specific approvals coming before the board. And then finally, if we're doing borrowing through the bond market for specific projects or funding through Penvest, et cetera, then we need to have approval for those financing as well, which is so all that's to say that what we're doing through this process is really at the conceptual level, the program and the plan for the next 5 years. The timeline that's shown here, we're getting ourselves about halfway through the planning and the presentation of the draft plans, and then we'll be hitting the public comment period for the next month or so, asking for board approval of the plans in October. As far as the public reviews, the Lehigh County Board of Commissioners did hear a brief presentation from me about the plan last week. And they have the plans to review. If they provide comment, that'll be great. I know the Allentown plan is already in the hands of the city of Allentown. And then after today's presentation, it'll go out to everyone else, the planning commissions of municipalities, posting on our website, et cetera. All right. So specifically, some highlights I wanted to share about the suburban division plan. They're similar to the Allentown division plan. There is an increase from the prior 5-year plan, but not quite as significant. And I'll talk about some of the drivers. So the last 5-year plan we presented was about $45 million. And this 5-year plan that we're presenting today is about $67 million. Some of the drivers for the increases are shown here, where we're seeing a fairly significant increase in smaller maintenance projects. Those annual recurring projects and equipment purchases, things of that nature, are increasing fairly significantly. Keep on top of our maintenance programs. We're also ramping up pretreatment plant capital spending, and that is driven in part to try to keep pace with some of the items that were outlined in the pretreatment plant master plan that was presented a couple months ago from Jacobs. And the biggest driver is really Western Lehigh interceptor projects that Chuck's gonna talk about when he gets to that detail. There are some pretty significant differences, I would say, between this plan and the Allentown division plan. The number one difference is that this plan does not include lead service line replacements. As you recall, in Allentown, we budgeted, I believe, $65 million over the course of 5 years for lead service line replacements. And in our suburban divisions, we have much lower occurrence of lead service lines, and we also have a lot more upfront work to do on inventory. So we don't have specific lead service line replacement projects included in this particular plan. Same thing for PFAS, where we have a pretty significant dollar amount in the Allentown budget, our Allentown capital plan for suburban division. We have some dollars for study, but not actual treatment projects. And then the last thing I wanted to mention really relates to the size of the Allentown division plan. While it's within that plan and will be funded through the Allentown division, there is an impact to suburban division to pass through a cost through the intermunicipal agreements. And that's really handled more on the operating side through the rate making process. So that's not captured in this plan, but it certainly will be captured in future evaluations that we present. Similar to what we did with the Allentown plan, we did not include the major projects that are being contemplated with the Act 537 plan. We're going to talk about those in a separate presentation later today. But those projects in the plan are being finalized and worked on now. So we would expect to present that separately another time, not part of this plan. Those are the major highlights in the suburban division plan for this year, and we'll get right into some of the projects. Chuck.
Yes, thanks, Liesl. I apologize in advance if you hear barking dogs and chickens in the background. There's a lot of background noise here. So if you hear that, it's coming from my end. So anyway, these are the admin projects, which include a lot of technology and building projects. This is the same list that you're looking at as last year. Not much has changed here. You can see those projects. They're all pretty much recurring things that we're working on every year. Next slide. These are two new admin projects. We have a new Munis implementation or a re-implementation that is being managed by Ed Klein and Chris Moen. And that will greatly improve accounting and customer service and project tracking at LCA. And the second project is main office improvements. That is intended to increase workspace and storage space. So that's a project that's been needed for quite a while as we grow here at LCA. Next slide. These are our water projects, our annual suburban water projects. The first item there, annual projects, that's a consolidation of a bunch of smaller projects. The breakdown I'll show you on the next slide. The drivers are required rehab, asset management, and it's recurring things. There's really nothing new under that. And then our annual water main replacement projects. For this year and next year, we're replacing developer installed water mains in North Whitehall Division. Those are plastic mains. We have a lot of water loss in North Whitehall that we're in the process of reducing. With this year's project is helping with that, and we're seeing a major reduction in water loss. But the next 2 years will be intended to replace all the developer built water lines up there and minimize our water loss. And then we're taking a year off in 2025 due to budget concerns and resuming then in 2026 and continuing. Here's a breakdown of the annual projects under Suburban Division Water. This is all the same except SCADA upgrades. We moved that from admin to underwater and wastewater as part of the annual projects. These are our system improvement projects. We have our fixed base meter reading system. This is intended to improve meter reading efficiencies and customer service. And what it is, it's receivers that are mounted on towers, and that will report to the main office and allow us to eliminate the drive around approach to collecting the meter reading information. So it will greatly improve efficiency. It should reduce costs. It will allow us to monitor leaks and problem accounts. So what we're looking at, we're in the study phase and the planning phase of that project, utilizing existing towers to cover the central Lehigh division. And we're thinking 4 or 5 towers should do it. And our engineer has made contact with the tower owners, and we have some costs that we'll be presenting as part of our next authorization for that project. Service costs and rental costs for using existing towers rather than building new towers, which we'd like to avoid. The second item there, North Whitehall water system improvements. What this is a fairly big ticket item, and this is to provide another interconnect with the Northampton Borough Municipal Authority water system. Right now, we have a single source of failure connection. We have one line that provides the water to the North Whitehall division. We'd like redundancy and looping of dead-end mains to improve service and water turnover up there. So that's what that project is. The water systems master planning, that's for suburban, and that's so we can plan ahead for the adequacy of our sources of our supplies and see what improvements are needed in the future. The next item there is upper system pump station and water main extension. We already constructed the water main extension from the CLD lower system to the CLD upper system via crossing under I-78 through a casing pipe, a 30-inch steel casing pipe that we acquired from Upper Macungie Township. And we capped that at both ends. And the plan is to construct a pump station at such time that development requires it. We recognize that there is a lot of potential for development in the Western Lehigh area, just west of Fogelsville, in what we call our high service area. And we want to be ready with a pump station design when that development becomes a reality. So right now we have a pump station design that is basically on the shelf and is permit ready, meaning that the design is far enough along that we could submit a permit application to DEP and get that rolling and get the final electrical design completed in time to satisfy potential development out there west of Fogelsville. And the last item there is our water meter replacement program. That is basically an annual large project to replace aging meters and meters that are no longer reporting, which customer service does a good job of tracking that with capital, and we're working together to implement annual projects to replace meters and stay on top of that. So those are system improvement projects. Here's a picture in the middle. That was a portable base station that Cord Maine brought in to test coverage for our CLD area for a fixed base project. So they brought in a portable truck mounted tower, and we did sort of a pilot program to see what kind of coverage we get here from the main office. So that data is captured in a planning document that we will provide to the board for review when we go for authorization for the next phase of that fixed base project. The picture on the top right, that's another tower near one of our reservoir sites. And the lower right picture is a commercial meter replacement. Here are the new projects for Suburban Division Water for the CAP plan. We have water quality studies and upgrades. What this project is focused on is our satellite systems, doing water quality studies with respect to emerging regulations such as PFAS, and checking those systems out for the presence of those contaminants. And then there's no money in here for improvements. It's just for study phase for now. And the other project is Central Lehigh System supply improvements. This involves providing additional supply as development drives requirements out in Western Lehigh, in particular, our upper system. This could be perhaps another interconnection with South Whitehall Township and or a new reservoir. Now we're getting into the financials for Suburban Water, so I'll turn this part over to Ed.
Okay, thank you. You can see the total amount of spending over the 5-year period is around $34.3 million. We think we will get 14 million plus a little bit from operations and reserves, basically from current rates. We're not really depleting reserves. Borrowing of 20.2 million or 20.3 million, depending on your round. So there's your sources, borrowing in cash from current rates of about $34.3 million. We assumed a volume increase of 1.0% each year. That's typically we're in the neighborhood of 1 to 2%, maybe a little bit more. So it's somewhat conservative, but we're putting something in there. Again, the borrowing at $20.2 million is a combination of some money that we'll have left over into 2024 from the Fulton borrowing that we did a couple years ago. So that'll roll over into 2024. And then we'll need to do some new borrowing of $20 million to support the capital program. Mostly coming for $12.1 million worth of main replacements that Chuck talked about, the meter replacement program of $4.2 million, combination on other smaller ones of $4 million. So that gets you to the $20.2 million. Rate impacts is I think in the first 3 years, we said it would be a 4% increase. And then in the last 2 years, the 3.5% increase would support what we're doing through the plan period.
This is Amir. Quick question for you. Can you go to the slide before? So one of the justifications that Chuck mentioned regarding water meter replacement was increase on the revenue. Because the meter are not reading correctly or whatever the reason is. Can you tell me where we have captured that increase on the revenue from the new $4 million expenditure on the meter replacement?
Basically, I haven't captured it in the capital plan. I know that they want to do the project, and how we were going to look at the project was that there would be some payback from the reduction in capital expenditures required to get into the program. Did not build any assumed revenues from that. To the extent that we exceed 1%, you could say we're getting some of that, but that's not what I built into the program.
So have we replaced meters in other places that we have a reference to see how much increased revenue we have gained?
I'm sorry, I didn't get the question.
Have we replaced, maybe this question goes to Chuck, have we replaced meters in other municipality or city or anywhere that we have a reference point to see how much increase in revenue we have seen?
That's a good question, Amir. I'm not aware that we did like a true up after that to see what the difference was. I know we always have meters that no longer report that are part of the scope of the replacement project, but I'm not aware that we've asked customer service to provide that. It is a good question. Perhaps something we can do after during our next project and at the end of it, to do a pre versus post.
Well, this is just a heads up when Chuck, you bring this one up for the funding.
Mhm.
You need to have the justification why we spent $4 million and what we get for it. And the reason why I'm asking these questions is just for you to be ready when that project has come for the board.
Yeah, okay.
I can add a little bit to that. I know that we have looked at that in customer service when we've done larger programs. For example, in 2012, the city of Allentown replaced a large chunk of their water meters right before and during the transition with the lease. So we were able to do some pretty good pre and post testing of water sales. The increase in water sales was relatively minimal, less than 2%. And that's partly because of the ability to estimate water meter readings. So when we can't get a meter reading, we're estimating usage. So we're still capturing revenue, but it may not be accurate. So it's really more about capturing accurate revenues versus actually capturing more revenues. That's what we've seen historically with these kinds of programs.
So I just want to make sure we all understand I did not build anything in there. So I'm staying on a very conservative basis with respect to the revenue. I think the 1.0% volume increase is kind of adequate for this. And to the extent that we pick up a little bit more, so be it, then we add a little bit to our reserves.
I just have a question for Chuck. Typically the rule of thumb was that older water meters, as they aged, would read less. So even if you got the data or didn't get the data, you were maybe not getting accurate data. Is that still the case here, Chuck? Is that something that it's also a concern, or is that just an old wives' tale that happens?
Actually, I do believe when they start to fail, they do underread Jeff. I don't have that like quantified, like what percent they underread, like what the declining curve would be, but yes, that is correct.
Well, what we have seen more of in our system is the meter reading system fail before the meter actually fails. So we can't get the meter reading at all because the radios are dying or the system can't pick up the reading. So we're estimating a lot of reads when the meters start to fail from that perspective. So.
Sean raised his hand. Go ahead, Sean.
Yep, just before I move on, going back to the, and it might be small potatoes when we're talking about the grand scope here, but going back to the North Whitehall developer, I believe it was main replacements. Do I have that correct?
Yeah, I think you're talking the annual main replacement project.
Yep. So this is for primarily developments, residential developments that these are taking place in.
Yeah, but not necessarily just in North Whitehall.
Okay.
We have our engineer Gannett Fleming. They do an annual prioritization based on breakage, based on risk, based on geology, age of pipe, all those sort of asset management parameters, and that's how we prioritize the projects. It just so happens that the last couple of years, the priority has focused on North Whitehall due to water loss. And condition of pipes. So yeah, we have a few years that are focused in North Whitehall. Then we'll likely be shifting to other locations like in our Central Lehigh division.
Okay, and there's no cost sharing element to this with initially developers or subsequent to that in regards to this work.
No, these are older developments that we've acquired the system. North Whitehall, I don't recall like how long we've owned those systems.
Okay.
I had a follow-up question to Amir's question, and that was with the replacement of the meters, there's an expectation of reduced maintenance on and replacements and sending people out for maintenance on the meters that have been in place. And that'd be another component of the savings.
It would be a component, quite frankly, not recognizing the revenue. I didn't recognize the expenses.
Maybe that's something that could be presented when we actually get to that place.
So we have some upside on revenue, potentially. You also have some upside on maybe reduced maintenance spending. It's not built into this.
All right, okay.
It does, especially when we get to the fixed base system, we'll rely on Chris and his team on customer care to be able to quantify the savings in terms of being able to read the meters more efficiently and have customer access to their meter reading information. All those kinds of things will add to the reduced operational cost.
My intent was not to derail the presentation. My intent was to give a heads up when we come for the approval for the $4 million, just to you guys to be recognized that you have to come justification. What is the return on that $4.5 million?
Thank you. Okay, continuing on with the presentation.
So this is what the cash flow looks like by year. You could see just looking at the net fund flows that are in bold there. We're on the positive side for each year. Again, that's splitting the CapEx in by year, like 7 million, couple fives, and almost 9 million in 2026, which was a big number for this fund. You can see the volume increase again every year, 1%. User charge increase, what we already talked about, 4.44, and then the last 2 years at 3.5. At the end of the day, the cash position looks fairly good at $9 million to almost $11 million, and we will maintain some invested operations cash of almost $3 million. So altogether, the unrestricted balances look fairly good, 12.2, 13.6 million. Days cash on hand is above the 180-day threshold. It starts at 300, finishes at 302, so it kind of goes down, comes back up. And certainly the debt coverage ratio is a good number as well, above the point to all that we said. So the metrics look fairly good, given the volume increase and given the rate increases, in addition to the borrowing. In terms of the new debt service, I have the borrowing phased in every year instead of borrowing it all up front. May not always play out that way, but when we try to finance, we try to get it so that I'm not taking all the cash out at once, and I could like load it in each year. So you got 284,000 of debt service coming up in the first year, and you'll finish off at the end after you borrow 20 million with a little bit over $1 million of brand new debt service.
Ed, when it comes to debt and debt service and borrowing, I don't think it would apply here at all, but just to ask the question, do you ever consider interest rate swaps?
We actually, Ted, we look at whatever we can do to lower interest rates. When you start to get into interest rate swaps, you're kind of hedging a little bit. And I'm trying to.
I'm not suggesting you don't get.
No. I try to worry about, number one, getting caught in a bad hedge.
Yeah.
And number two is, I think given the economy and what's happened to it, it's more than likely gonna go up some and then kind of comes down a bit, so.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, now we'll get into the suburban division wastewater projects, starting with the Western Lehigh Interceptor and Little Lehigh Relief Interceptor related projects. First item on this list, Central Lehigh wastewater capacity planning and expansion. What this project is, it's the final engineering analysis related to the Act 537 mandate. So it's the completion of all the evaluations of the different alternatives, and that should complete by 2025 in the capital plan. Next one, Spring Creek Pump Station Force Main Condition Assessment. This project is driven by the Act 537 planning as well. What it is, it's a technology called BEM, Broadband Electronic Magnetic, or I forget what the exact acronym stands for, but it's basically you excavate around the pipe and you strap on this electronic / magnetic device, and it measures the integrity of the pipe wall thickness, gives you an assessment of the condition of that force main. We had our consultant express concern about this force main, which has been in the ground for over 30 years, and the results of this assessment will be baked into the Act 537 plan. DEP has directed us to include an evaluation of this critical force main. So that work will conclude next year, and we'll have a report from Arcadis, and that will be included with the 537 documents. The next project, the signatory I&I investigation and remediation. What that is, it's the test and seal of lateral tap connections in primarily in upper and lower Macungie townships. The project, we're doing a project this year for that work. That's the 1.7 million figure that you see there, and the cost of that is being shared with upper and lower Macungie townships. And then there's another large project in the capital plan to continue that effort to test and seal and grout all the lateral tap connections, which were shown to be problematic in prior studies that were done by Arcadis. Next project, Upper Western Lehigh Interceptor Pump Station and Force Main. What this project is, it's the recommendation of the interim Act 537 plan, and what it involves is a pump station up by our pretreatment plant to pump a portion of the effluent from the plant around the Trexlertown, what we call the bottleneck, to bypass the bottleneck, which is behind the 1760 grill, and in that vicinity, and to send that wastewater to an Upper Macungie manhole near Grange Park. So it involves about 1.3 mile of force main, and the pump station is going to pump about 2.5 million gallons per day. This project was conceived by Upper Macungie Township as a way to relieve the overflows from the hydraulic bottleneck downstream near the fire company in the 1760 grill. So this project is currently in design. It will be in construction phase toward the end of this year, and then the construction will overlap 2024 and 2025. The next project is Western Lehigh Interceptor rehab and repairs. What this involves is manhole rehab, test and seal work downstream of the Spring Creek pump station, and other Act 537 related recommendations for system improvement to keep out inflow and infiltration. As you know, a lot of the Western Lehigh Interceptor, most of it is located within a floodplain. So we're in the process of flood-proofing manholes, raising manholes, installing bolt-down lids, replacing frames, covers, all that kind of stuff. And all that work is under this project. Incidentally, we did get a $200,000 grant this year for the manhole rehab. We're going to apply that to purchasing new frames and covers. So we got some help on that project. Last project on the list is Park Pump Station upgrade. You folks have been seeing this for years. That this is the phase 2 upgrade, which involves the replacement of the generator out there. The generator is on order. It's a natural gas generator. It will be delivered in March of next year, and we'll be coming to you folks with an authorization for the general contract. If you recall, last time we bid the electrical and the general contract. We did not get a single bid on the GC contract because of the lead time in the generator. I think that contractors did not want to stick their necks out and commit to prices, not knowing the potential changes to concrete, fuel, all those things. It was too risky. So we're going to bid it again this fall, so we can align the timing of the GC work with the EC work, and complete that job by next summer. So that's the Western Lehigh projects. Here's just some fun pictures showing the calamity that happens in Upper Western Lehigh during peak weather events. I don't know what storm it was, the picture on the left, but that is Spring Creek Road near Ancient Oaks. No, actually, I think that's near our Spring Creek pump station, which is a little farther down the road. And then you see a surcharging manhole blowing out under the frame. This slide, okay, this is the interim Act 537 plan, which, as I mentioned, included the Upper Western Lehigh pump station and force main project right near where Liesel is showing the force main, the 1.3 miles of force main. It goes along the Route 222 bypass and ties into a manhole over at Grange Park, an Upper Mac manhole. So as I mentioned before, the pump station is going to pump treated effluent from our pretreatment plant, about 2.5 million gallons per day. That was put into the hydraulic model, and that amount was determined to be adequate to avoid dry weather overflows in the hydraulic bottleneck area of the Western Lehigh. Here's a list of the satellite system projects, starting with our Wynwood system. We have some I&I problems up there in North Whitehall Township. Wynwood is located along 145, right before the Trigler's Bridge. We have some internal grout and line replacement, some dig up replacements that need to be done next year. So we have some money in the plan to address that. Western Weisenberg mechanical screen. This is the Arcadia West Business Park out at New Smithville. And this is to install a mechanical screen in our wastewater plant out there. Right now, the plant gets a lot of rags from the industries, and they tend to clog equipment, foul equipment. They hang up on pump floats, they hang up on other instrumentation, and cause operations headaches to clean out those rags that become like really hard as they build up. So they're very difficult to clean out. So we're going to put a mechanical screen in that will capture the rags and remove them and dispose of them in a small container to optimize operations up there. The next project is Heidelberg Heights I&I investigation and remediation. This is a DEP mandated project under our consent order and agreement to get the inflow and infiltration out of that developer built system. We've made a lot of progress. We've replaced about 85% of the original vitrified clay pipe up there, and we have one more project this year to do that. And then the money and the plan that you see from 2024 to 2028, that is for private system repairs. Because the next phase of work, after we get all the main and the laterals on the public side replaced, we expect we're still going to have some problems, and those problems stem from the private side, and we're going to have to do some investigation up there and possibly some repair work, and there'll be grants involved and a lot of public coordination involved in that program. But it does appear in our implementation schedule in the consent order agreement that we have to do that work. So that's a big lift for us. Next one, Heidelberg Heights wastewater treatment plant rehab. That involves a mechanical screen. Like the Arcadia West project, that gets a lot of inorganic solids that build up at the headworks, and the plant has an old grinder, but the grinder is not efficient, and the stuff just reknits together downstream of that grinder, and the preferred solution is to just get it out of the waste stream. So we have a project now that is actually in construction. We're waiting for equipment to be delivered, and it will be completed next year at Heidelberg Heights. Next project is Lynn Township wastewater treatment plant improvements. What is in the capital plan for those improvements is adding another final clarifier. Right now, the plant has an original final clarifier. It's tiny. It's 20 feet in diameter. That tank has been in continuous service since the late 70s, I think, when that plant was built. And we have been unable to take that tank out of service and rehab it because it's the single final clarifier out there. So we don't have any redundancy. So the original plant was designed with pipes that were stubbed out with the idea of adding another final clarifier. So we will construct a tank and tie into those lines and build another one. And then after the new one is online, we'll be able to take the old tank down and rehab it. So that project is really needed because of system improvement, efficiency, and also regulatory, because the existing final clarifier, it's undersized for the flows that we're getting now in that system. Maybe when it was originally designed, it was adequate for development at that time, but nowadays we're on the ragged edge with performance of the final clarifier. So that project will be constructed next year. Also, we are in need of aeration system improvements up there, and we'll be tackling that after the final clarifier. Last project on the list is Lynn Township I&I investigation and remediation. This is also located up in the New Tripoli area where the plant is. And this involves some private side investigation, smoke testing, CCTV work, that nature of work. Because we do have a corrective action plan with the DEP up there because of the hydraulic problems during peak weather conditions. We are required to get the I&I out of the system. We've done a lot of work up there to date to try to do that. We've rehabbed a bunch of manholes, cleared easements, did CCTV work, did test and seal work, but we still have not eliminated all the I&I. So we think some of it could be coming from the private side. So there's money in the capital plan to investigate that and deal with that. Next slide. Here are a couple pictures from Heidelberg Heights, our annual sewer main replacement project. You could see on the right, they're installing manhole wrap, which is impermeable layer of material that's installed around the manhole rings and the chimney, as we call it, the upper part of the manhole to keep infiltration out of the manhole. So we're doing that to all the manholes up there. And, you know, we have seen an improvement in the peak flows at the plant. Here's a picture of the Lynn Township wastewater treatment plant. You're just seeing in this picture the single final clarifier. So where you see that the bend in the fence just above that, that's where the new tank is going to go. And right near where those bollards are, like pipes are stubbed out for the new tank. So there's adequate space for the new tank. It should be pretty easy to construct it. Maybe some groundwater, some excavation dewatering will be involved with respect to the creek. Is just, you can kind of see at the edge of the lawn there, that's where the creek is. So we expect some excavation dewatering, but the design should be pretty simple. These are the annual projects under Suburban Division Wastewater. Well, we have a breakdown of the consolidated projects right there, and it's similar to water with SCADA. SCADA was added this year. We took that out of admin, as I mentioned before, and put that under water and wastewater where we think it more belongs. So there's the breakdown of those annual projects. And here are the new projects for Suburban Division Wastewater. First project, North Whitehall Township Act 537 planning. This is a coordinated effort between LCA and North Whitehall to update their Act 537 plan. Due to the numerous developer-built systems in the township, there is a need to evaluate potential regionalization opportunities with all these plants all over the place. And we're going to coordinate with North Whitehall and you know, chip in financially, and it will benefit both parties. This project has sort of come to light due to some potential development in the township and issues that we've had at our Sand Spring wastewater plant. Second project is Spring Creek Pump Station upgrade. The project in the capital plan is an electrical upgrade. It involves replacement of the variable frequency drives, which are at the end of their service life, and also some other electrical components. That project is under design right now, and it will be constructed next year and in 2025. Next project, Sand Spring Wastewater Treatment Plant improvements. As the board is aware, we've been struggling up there with our new plant. We're having process issues related to the new warehouse up there. And the money in the plan is basically for some process improvements to enhance settling, enhance nitrification up there, and get us out of regulatory problems. We hope that's the extent of the improvements that we have to construct, but time will tell. That project it was authorized actually by the board, I think, a couple months ago, so it is underway. And last project on the list is Spring Creek Pump Station force main relocation. This project is being driven by the turnpike widening on Lower Macungie Road. We have to relocate a section of our force main, and cost is being shared with PennDOT. But the cost to relocate the force main that's in there right away right now, we have to pay a portion of that. So that project is going to be constructed, I believe, in 2025, is the latest information we have from PennDOT. Their design engineer is Gannett Fleming, who we work with on other projects, so we have good communication with them, and that project is moving along. Here's a picture of the variable frequency drives at the Spring Creek Pump Station. That they look all nice and new in this picture, but they're not. They're the original VFDs. We have problems with them. We have problems getting replacement parts. So this is an asset management related project, and I think operations will be happy to see this one completed. This is kind of hard to see, but this is a picture from the design engineer Gannett Fleming for the relocation of our force main. If you see the bold line on the top of the plan view, that's the proposed, right there, that's the proposed route of our relocated force main, and you can see it involves a new boring under the turnpike. That's where it's a big ticket item, and hence the cost of that project, and the cost reflected in the plan is what we think our share is going to be. It's not the entire project cost, it's our 50% share. And the lower road there that ties in, that's Mill Race Road, if you're familiar with the area. Yeah, right there. And now we get to the financials, so I'll turn it over to Ed.
Okay, so we're gonna spend $34.2 million on all the projects that Chuck just went through. Two sources, basically cash from operations and reserves of $17.8 million, and new borrowing of $16.4 million, and we haven't borrowed to this fund in a while, so that's kind of new. So that gets you to $34.2 million. The recommended borrowing of 16.4, well, that is for Western Lehigh Interceptor projects only. What we're trying to do is, given that there are just, I'll call out quite a few uncertain amounts coming up in the future with respect to 537 that aren't even in the plan. I think it makes sense and it's more prudent to continue to maintain reserves and even build up reserves for the amount of money that's going to come down the road. It helps to keep the rates flat that are existing now. And like I said, you're going to see a lot of stuff on 537 down the road, and we'll see this when we discuss it all with the signatories.
So Kat, quick question. Is it random or was it planned that the water and wastewater would both be 34 million and
Actually, from my financial perspective, it just turned out that way. Quite frankly, even the borrowing came relatively close as well.
Okay.
I mean, water is a little bit more proportionally at 20 million versus the 60 million here, and that only one reason why would be just one group, the Western Lehigh Interceptor group.
Okay.
So, yeah, I guess you could say planned randomness.
I'm curious.
So you can see the cash flows and in terms of the amount coming in from reserves, there's no reserves being used. So if you look at the numbers, net fund flows 3.3, 4.2, 1.2, 4.9. We are building up reserves and I consider that a good thing. The revenue increase required would be 17.2% in the first year. Kind of drops a little bit based on some pay-go capex coming out in the second year and kind of inches right back up again to 1.9. I'll look at the cash balances. You got 13.3 going to $28 million. We do have some invested balances and somewhat hefty at $7.1 million that we say we'll hold on to for all 5 years. So when you look at the unrestricted balances, you're starting at $20.4 million and going up to 35. But again, you know, in the years 2026 and 2027, and even 2028, if you look at the capital spending up there, you're going from like 12 million and 13 million down to 6, and then all the way down to 2 and 2. I think there's going to be more filler coming in them years. So in terms of days cash on hand, well, we look pretty stellar with them numbers, well above 180, and the debt service, as you're borrowing, and again, I'm putting in the borrowing every year. Again, it may or may not play out that way, or it may take drawdowns, whatever. You're going from 8.59 to 4.74, so no time you get into jeopardy on covenants.
Okay. That was a lot of projects, a lot of information. Just kind of coming back to where we started with a little bit of a recap of the plan. So again, from last year's presentation to this year's presentation, we have an increase of $23 million capital spending proposed in the plan. And those are driven primarily by a larger maintenance program and the Western Lehigh Interceptor projects. Those are the biggest drivers for that change. With the borrowing for water and wastewater, financial performance is maintained at very good levels, which Ed reviewed with us. And the rate impacts that we're showing for this plan are modest. 3.5% to 4% on the water side, and really besides the 2024 impact on wastewater, basically flat for wastewater. And the caveat is that as we understand a little more about how the Allentown division projects will come into the schedule, as well as how we're funding for Act 537, those rate forecasts are going to change dramatically, because those costs pass through to the suburban communities through their rates, not necessarily through the capital. So we should also be looking forward to our capital plan increasing significantly. I say looking forward, not in a positive, excited way, but that's just what's going to happen as we roll into the Act 537 plan and finalizing that. Those projects will come into the plan as well. So that's the recap of the plan that we just presented. The schedule moving forward with the conclusion of this presentation. Again, the plans go out for public comment period of about a month, and then we'll be back in October for any of your final comments and approval.
One question, just to confirm. So regardless of whatever the Act 537 plan recommends as final alternatives, nothing in here is impacted by that. Everything that's related, Western Lehigh, whatever, all that work needs to be done is in addition to, nothing would ever be like, well,
yeah,
we could have done without that.
I mean, essentially the Act 537 plan is on top of these plans that we're presenting. Yeah.
Okay.
It looks really good now. The question is, will it still look really good when we pile up a lot more money?
And in about 5 minutes, when we present the Act 537 plan update, we'll see why we're concerned about those dollars.
But we'll have some reserves. I mean, you can see the numbers, and that was important, I think, from our perspective, to see that we'll have some money for a rainy day. So,
Mr. Chairman?
Go right ahead, Mark.
Yes, I have a question. Number one, a few brief questions. the definition of exactly what is a satellite system.
I can answer that. I mean, I think satellite system for us is anything that's not our Central Lehigh division or the Allentown division. We have 13 water systems scattered throughout the county. They're all small except for the Central Lehigh division and the Allentown division. Andrew, does that fit your definition?
Yeah, that was classified. So I would call it satellite system.
And then as a follow-up, I live in the very seldom discussed Northern Lehigh collection system, which basically consists of Washington Township, portions thereof, the village of Slakedale and the village of Emerald. But I'm also a power of attorney for my mother, who lives in the borough of Slatington. So I'm pretty familiar with the unique relationships in terms of finance and in terms of system failure. We have the highest, I think the highest probably rate fee in this Northern Lehigh collection area of all of LCA. Is that, can somebody verify that with me? I mean, I know when I was listening as a commissioner to the citizens of Allentown discussing the the lease and everything, I kind of wished I would have some of their rates, but I believe we have one of the highest, if not the highest. I actually pay less per gallon for the water that comes from the Slatington Water Authority than my mother, who lives in the borough of Slatington. On the other hand, I send everything back as far as wastewater back to the Slatington sewage treatment plant, and then I pay a little bit more, which I guess I could understand. But what I'm hearing as a ratepayer is that I'm going to be taking a hit a little bit, not so much this year, but probably next year I'll see a rate increase in the amount that I send back. I would like if somebody could maybe do a little overview at one of our upcoming board meetings on, just to give me for and other board members of maybe a brief familiarization with what this little, I don't want to call it a bastard child, but this little unique area up here in Northern Lehigh is, and how the relationship ties in with the borough of Slatington. I know they recently did have a hazmat issue up at the sewage treatment plant, but one of the things that concerns me as the power of attorney part for my mother is that there is an incapability of the borough, or an inability of the borough, to acquire grant funding to do main replacements in their town. And as a result of not getting the grants for the main replacements, then the highways and the streets do not get updated. So, and I know we had that big main breakdown in Washington Township where the interconnection was over the winter months. So, I mean, I can't politically advocate for another acquisition, but I know that the borough of Slatington is having difficulty affording the projects that they have, as I'm sure most small municipalities are. So I guess I'm interested in what our relationship is with the borough of Slatington. So, and other municipalities that might be out there. But I think this is rather a unique one because they supply and we send back just via an LCA line. And then I would be interested in maybe meeting with somebody privately offline about what some of the future projects would be that maybe we could assist some way or another with some of our small municipalities, either in the form of helping to obtain grants or other methods that might be available to benefit the public. It's a lot to digest.
Yeah, Mark, we could certainly put something together, maybe even during the budget process, because we do spend a fair amount of time in the budget process talking about rates and how they're put together for the 2024 proposal, in the budget. The relationship with Slatington and Washington Township is unique. So, not to get into it here in the context of the capital plan, but there are some extenuating circumstances in terms of the relationship we have with the township that involves the borough, you know, and how the system ownership works up there. So it is different from the other systems, as you are well aware of.
And as far as lead pipe replacement, I know, I guess it was probably 20 years ago when my village, just like Dell, had sewer replacements. So I had to put the lateral into my house, and I took advantage and put a copper service in. But I don't know how many other lead lines we have in these older municipalities, and you know, the lead that we test, Amir can probably attest to this, is the lead collection is just dependent on how aggressive the borough tends to get with their water chemistry. So I don't know where we stand there as far as older lead lines that are in some of these houses. So again, maybe we have that data that you could share with me offline. That might be good to know.
Yeah, and just to follow up on that, Mark, as I mentioned earlier, we did not include lead service line replacement as a project in the suburban capital plan. It's a big component of the Allentown plan. And the main reason for that is because our inventory of lead service lines in our suburban division is not as complete as we'd like it to be. So we need to do work on developing that inventory before we can really assess what the capital dollars are that are needed up there. So, but I do recognize Slakedale is the area where we have the most likely prevalence of lead in terms of, you know, some of the communities that we serve. A lot of the communities we serve in our central Lehigh division are newer developments, so we know there's not a high likelihood of lead in those developments.
So could I expect maybe like a 10-minute overview of exactly what my little Northern Lehigh collection system is at our next board meeting for a presentation?
If that's the wish of the board, we can certainly do that.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Fine. I see Kevin's here, so I don't know what time he came in, but it's not necessary for us to get into the next topic. All right.
12:10, Brian.
Okay, thank you. I missed it.
I guess a quick comment, we talk about the lead issues. There was a piece of the news today about, maybe you saw that a lot of municipalities are struggling with this and actually turning back federal funding. Help me here, Liesl.
Yeah.
Because they're not quite sure how much lead they have and how to find it,
Yeah.
et cetera, et cetera.
It's actually the states that are turning back the federal funds.
States are.
So the way that the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act funding came through as a federal program being funneled through the state revolving funds, which in Pennsylvania is our program called Penvest that we borrow from or do grant applications from. But each state has their own revolving fund program, and those state programs determine what their needs are. The federal program allocated a certain amount of funding to each state based on their assessment of needs. And some of the states are saying, well, it's a 5-year program. For this first year, we don't need it because we don't have anyone applying for loans, or we don't even know where the lead service lines are, et cetera. Pennsylvania is not in that situation. They accept the money and they're trying to get it out. In fact, Pennsylvania seems to have more demands for funding than they have actual funds. So, you know, our program, we got $5 million application. We got three and a half roughly in grants, and the rest will have to be a loan because they didn't have enough to fund 100% grant.
Okay. Okay, let's move on. Are we next?
So the capital plan presentation is concluded. Unless there's any other comments, we'll be moving on and getting this out to the public for the public review process. In response to Mark's request, I could certainly add that to the agenda if the board would like to see that on one of the upcoming agendas. I'm not positive about timing in terms of which one. But...
How about if you check with Mark offline and discuss briefly, and then see if Mark wants to continue with a more open discussion on that.
That's fine. Mark, I'll be in touch.
Regarding the administration budget for capital plan.
We reviewed those in the very first couple of slides. Those were the technology projects that Chuck reviewed.
All right. Okay, are we done with that then? Moving on to the next topic.
We are
All
done.
right.
Well, actually, just time out, I should say, because we don't plan to bring this back to you until October. And now that you have the documents in your hands, the capital plans, if the board has any questions about specific projects or comments about it, certainly you can funnel them to me or, and I'll get them through to Chuck or Ed, depending on the question or comment, so we can incorporate that into any final changes that we give you.
Okay.
In October.
I think the significance of the Allentown increases, there's legitimate, very well defined reasons why it has to be increased substantially, but the issue becomes then the question of personnel and the request for additional people, and we had some studies done before, so I think we want to have more time spent on what we had planned on getting from consultant reviews before, and how that fits into where we're heading in the future and the need for the 7 additional bodies. So if you want to get into more discussion on that, we can do that next meeting.
We actually, our next meeting is the right time. We have not made any requests for additional staff at this point. You'll see a request for that at when we prepare our budget assumptions for the September meeting.
All right. Very good. Thank you. Moving on, then we have the next topic is still under finance administration. It's resolution number 8, 2023-1. Specifying authorized persons to perform financial transactions. Seeking approval is the pink documents in the board package, digital board package pages 73 to 74.
This one is fairly straightforward, I hope. Authorization for people to sign documents that relate to financial transactions. This is something that we've historically done and then provided to our financial institutions as proof that these are the authorized people. We've had a little bit of turnover and changes in people since the last time we did this. I believe it was 2008. Last time we did this, it was quite a few years ago. So yeah, so this is the updated list of authorized persons. And Ed, do you wanna, is there anything more that?
No, actually, we're doing nothing more than locking off people that are no longer in the business and replacing them with people that are here. Especially, my concern is to make sure I got my controller able to sign checks who has not been able to do that. So.
Critical.
And this is the form of resolution that our financial banks and whatnot have accepted, so it's
Yes, we send these to the bank so that they know that they have been authorized appropriately by a board of directors, and then we have a choice to either put all of them on there or less than all.
Will it have to actually be present during the signing of this document?
I'm here.
we already have the
They've all
signatures
signed.
collected. We just didn't want to publish a document with all of our signatures on them,
Good idea.
on the website, but the official resolution has the signatures.
Okay.
All
All right, pretty straightforward. We have a resolution before us, 8-2023-1. I heard a motion to accept.
Yes.
Motion from Jeff, seconded by Ted. We do need a voice vote on this, so please go roll call vote.
right, roll call vote for 8-2023-1, Brian Noggle,
Yes.
Amir Famili,
Yes.
Ted Lyons.
Yes.
Linda Rosenfeld,
Yes.
Norma Cusick,
Yes.
Kevin Baker,
Yes.
Morgan,
Yes.
Sean Ziller,
Yes.
Mark Brown.
Yes.
Thank you.
And that's to adopt the resolution.
That's to adopt the resolution number 8-2023-1. Resolution specifying particular employees as of authorized person to perform authority financial transactions. We did it.
Thank you.
Now sign your check. Controller sign. Okay, we next have a presentation under wastewater KISS modeling, final alternatives analysis. It's a presentation. And it's somebody's gonna
Yes.
make that presentation.
Actually, we're doing a little change of pace here, and while we have Jim Shelton from Arcadis here, who's a principal engineer, and Phil DePoe, who's our senior planning engineer. I'm actually going to take the opportunity to run through the presentation and really focus a little less on the engineering and a little more forward on the big decisions that we need to make as this Act 537 plan kind of comes together and takes shape for the public. So, and then you guys by all means jump in when I don't know what I'm talking about. It's not a technical presentation today.
He's calling for the bar. Thermostat.
Oh, I know.
Let's go over here.
You just moved your seat.
Yeah, we can switch seats.
Because I have a volunteer to temperature to in whatever the right direction is. Thanks, Ed. For those who are on Zoom, it's a little chilly in our room today, so we're trying to get comfortable. All right, so are you okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm tough.
All right, so we're going to get started, and I'm going to present some information about really about where we are with our Act 537 plan. You've heard presentations fairly regularly from primarily from Phil and sometimes from Jim on the engineering side of things. I'm going to touch on that just a little bit, but really we're going to focus on how we're moving from the engineering into the decision making and final plan preparation, which is not as much about the technical, much more about financial, political, big decisions. So just orient yourself. I'm pretty sure the board of directors knows where the service area is, but as a reminder, we're talking about all of the municipalities in Lehigh County whose sewage flows through various collection systems and interceptors to the Kleins Island wastewater treatment plant in Allentown for final treatment and discharge. And there are 15 municipalities. So getting all 15 municipalities on the same page with these big decisions is quite a feat. So what we're trying to do with this plan is address three major challenges. And we've talked a lot about the various components and technical aspects, but essentially we're trying to solve three major problems. The first one is aging infrastructure. And the aging infrastructure, really, I'm focused on the collection systems, the pipes underground, and that the age of the infrastructure is what allows water to get into the pipes and create those wet weather flows. The sewer overflows, the regulatory presence that we've felt related to the wet weather overflows. The second major challenge is the size of the infrastructure. We have essentially a pipeline network that was built 40, 50 years ago, in some cases much older, and it was built based on projections of 30 or 40 years. And we're at that point where those pipes are full, the treatment plants are at capacity, et cetera. And so the ability to accept new flows is a challenge. Having the size of the infrastructure be part of the problem means the overflows are worse, but it also means it restricts the ability for growth or new connections to happen in a general way. The third challenge is much more specific to Western Lehigh County, where we have this pretreatment facility in Fogelsville. And that pretreatment facility was built in 1990. And so a lot of the components at the plant have reached the end of their useful life, and the plant is also at capacity. So specific challenge related to that is the kind of growth that maybe the region is looking for in terms of manufacturing and the jobs and the tax benefits, et cetera, that brings is restricted until we can solve that problem. So three major challenges, three major drivers for this plan, trying to solve them all with one comprehensive regional Act 537. So what else the plan has to include, just a few things I wanted to highlight. First of all, we really want to make sure the plan is all inclusive. So in addition to major projects to address the problems, we also need to include routine repair and rehab projects. We've done master planning work for the Kleins Island plant, for pretreatment plant. Those need to be incorporated into the plan. We also need to incorporate future flows so that we're accommodating the future needs of the region. We need to know how we're paying for it, what the rate impacts are going to be. And then we need to know how we're going to implement it in terms of the staffing piece that you mentioned, Brian, but also just the sequence and the how the projects fit together, and the institutional structure, meaning who's in first position to get these projects done, and how that relates to our agreements with the other municipalities. It's a big plan. Our timeline is shown here in a simplified version. We've been working and very focused in this first block of doing the engineering work, flow modeling, working with the municipalities on their growth projections. And we're kind of moved into this next phase where we need to make decisions on those engineering solutions. And we need to understand the financial and institutional approaches that we're going to implement. And then finally, we've committed to submit the plan to DEP by March of 2025. And we're still on schedule for that. And then we'll be doing implementation. The implementation period is a 10-year period from 2026 to 2035. That's the focus of this plan. All right, so the engineering analysis, just using a round number, saying we're roughly 90% complete with the engineering analysis. Is that fair to say? So we're pretty close to knowing what all the solutions are. It's really getting down to decision time, which solution. So again, using these three kind of categories, or these three major challenges, we have solutions for all of them. The first one related to aging infrastructure, the collection system challenges, really the main solution is the municipal sewer rehab program. Municipalities have all put their plans or their ideas together for that, and then just trying to bring that together into the plan and understand how that's going to affect the other items. Addressing the size of the existing infrastructure, there are a variety of solutions, but essentially they fall into categories of parallel interceptors, pump stations, and treatment plant upgrades. And you've heard quite a bit about some of those from Phil already, what those solutions might be. And then on the pretreatment side, major plant upgrades and capacity programs are needed. And we heard from Jacobs a couple of months ago about what that looks like. So just trying to pull all this together into one plan, all these solutions. So put a little more granularity to it. I'm not going to talk about each of these in any detail because we have presented, I think, the components already. But again, trying to see it as a comprehensive total plan. Start at the bottom end of the plant where the Kleins Island wastewater plant sits. And we really have two components to the projects that we'll be incorporating into the plan. First are the wet weather capacity enhancements, and Phil has gone through the sequencing of those projects, the pump station upgrades, the parallel treatment options, and also the bioactive flow pilot that was done. And then we have the master plan facility improvements, the projects, the repair and replacement type projects that we just need to do. Relating to the core conveyance system, we have two really major projects. I believe we've spoken about each of these already. The Little Lehigh interceptor is undersized and needs to be upgraded through some form of parallel along Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard in Allentown. That will be a major project. Another very large project is dealing with the Western Lehigh interceptor, and we have a couple of options I'm going to share with you related to that. Pretreatment plant, again, we heard the Jacobs study and the results of their master plan. We have capacity related upgrades as well as master plan facility improvements to address the age of the plants. Municipal system improvements really focused on reducing the inflow and infiltration. They're really almost two separate projects. The inflow programs focus on the manhole projects. The board has heard about those that we're doing in Allentown. Each of the communities are doing their own manhole projects as well. And then infiltration programs, the pipelining, working on the taps and all of those programs. And then finally, there's a subset of interceptors that are located out in the communities that are really specific to each signatory that are showing some challenges related to inflow. And the signatories will address them either through progress on their I&I programs, or there may need to be some parallel interceptor projects in those communities. So it's kind of getting to the short list of all the projects. This is I think a pretty good summary of everything project wise that's going to be included in the Act 537 plan. Bill or Jim, anything you want to say about any of those?
Just want to point out on the Klein's Island, our current strategy / tactics, I always confuse those two, is to limit ourselves to a peak at 120. You've heard me do presentations on the modeling that show with the I&I we have, we're north of that by the 2050 timeline. There's a lot of debate about what water conservation is actually doing to our system, and how much growth is actually going to come. So when you look at that 2036 on period, we may need to have additional wet weather capability at Klein's Island. So the things we're going to put in there, we're going to make sure that we're leaving room for those things. But the intention right now is to build to that level. And that's a sound conservative plan based on the history that we've seen over the last 15 years as well.
What's the current peak at the plant?
That's a difficult question to answer because it doesn't get to the plant because the pipes that go to it are too small.
Oh, no, I understand that'll be good. I'll follow 3, but what currently goes through the plant from a peak flow now?
Well, the most the plant can handle is based on its main pump and auxiliary pump station, which is in the high 80s in terms of its current capabilities.
They can push through 90 depending on the.
The 90 is around.
90-ish, right? Yeah, 90 is pushing it, 89 is probably the highest that I've seen.
Some of that depends on staff comfort and knowledge and experience and their ability to maximize what they can get through the plant in a storm event.
Right. It's a giant increase in our ability to process people flows in the plant.
Just one comment on the bottom bullet there. You know, the intent is to not have to do those projects, to do I&I removal, but not all of them can be handled that way. So that last bullet point, it's specific per signatory.
There's about 10 of them, and each one have slightly different drivers around them. They're idiosyncratic to each municipality.
We're going to see those on the maps that are on the next 2 slides, I believe.
Lisa, I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
On what is the projected municipal growth that the municipalities, are giving us? And could the pre-treatment plant capacity expansion accommodate this growth?
So try to answer that as best I can. The municipalities, all 15 municipalities together, have projected roughly 7 million gallons per day of additional sewage flows over the entire planning period, which is through 2050. Now, we're planning for projects through 2035 and trying to understand how much of that new flow is going to happen now versus later. The municipalities generally front load their projections because they have a sense of what might happen in the near term. And then the longer term flow increases are a little more amorphous, I'll say. So that's the number, the big number. Now, that's for all 15 municipalities that are flowing to Klein's Island. Specific to the pre-treatment plant, which is really serving Upper Macungie Township, Weisenberg and Low Hill. Well, Weisenberg and Low Hill essentially have no growth plan. They're not planning to expand their service area that's contributing to this system. So Upper Macungie Township and the industrial growth is really becoming very difficult to pin down because it depends on market conditions and it depends on Lehigh Valley Economic Development Corporation and how they attract new industries to our region. So we have growth projections from our current industrial customers. We have growth projections from the township. And then we have an additional buffer that we've added saying there may be some additional industrial growth. We just don't know what it's going to be. And that's what we use to put into the pre-treatment plant capacity numbers that Jacobs used for their master plan.
Question.
Yes.
To comment on what you just said, in terms of planning and building, isn't this kind of like a step function that is all isn't just linear? You go up in capacity and you can accommodate so much that you go up in capacity and so forth and so on. If we analyze it from that point of view, that if you can follow what I'm saying here.
Yeah, it's, we've internally been calling it flow triggered planning. The state hates that terminology for some reason, I'm not sure why, but it makes perfect sense. And that's why we've been looking very closely at what are the pieces that need to be built. Pipes are a one and done, right? So that's why like the previous works are typically on 10 to 20 year horizons. We're trying to do 30. So we're not leaving our kids with the same problem we're trying to solve now. So when we build a new interceptor, a new pump station, we're trying to do that. Within the treatment plant though, where it's more modular, we don't want to build for 180 MGD if that never materializes. That's why we're picking the 120. So where we can be modular, we're being modular. And because we're on an island, at Klein's Island, you know, we're looking at footprint as well as, you know, what can be done so that we don't plop it in the middle of an area that now we need for two other things. So there's a lot of smart thinking going into the flow triggers behind this in terms of the long-term engineering plan for this.
Thank you.
And Norma, did I answer your question?
Yes, thank you, Lisa.
Yeah. All right, so maps are a little bit difficult to see, but wanted to share basically we have two alternatives. There's some variations to them that we're looking at, but essentially there are two main alternatives, and the main variation relates to the Western Lehigh interceptor. So just to point out a couple of things on here, we have Klein's Island shown here, and then this red line that kind of backs out from Klein's Island is that little Lehigh interceptor project along Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard. And then we have this in this alternative, it's orange. This is the Western Lehigh interceptor, and it's much longer project, so it costs more to do this work. And then, as Bill mentioned, those flow challenged interceptors that are specific to each signatory, they're shown on the map in mostly these yellow lines that show they're up in the signatory systems. You know, up in Upper Macungie Township or Salisbury, South Whitehall, et cetera. So those are the projects that maybe could go away if we're really successful with our I&I programs, and are not considered core conveyance projects because they're only serving really one or maybe two municipalities. So in this alternative, kind of ignore the details in the boxes. They're there if you'd like to see them, but the main story of this alternative is what's happening with the Western Lehigh Interceptor, which is a parallel interceptor going in right alongside what we have now. And it follows this circuitous sort of path because it's following the Little Lehigh Creek. So that's the one alternative. Basically all of the other projects stay the same between this one and the next one.
Yeah, just one caveat, we don't know exactly how we're proposing to construct the Little Lehigh Interceptor, whether that be a combination of like microtunneling or open cut. But so that's a construction method down.
And we'll get into that on one of the later slides as well. So the second alternative, again, at the high level, still relates to Western Lehigh Interceptor. And here you see the Western Lehigh Interceptor is still here, but it's black. Black just means it's an existing system. And instead of doing a parallel, we would do pumping. So we would take the waste coming out of the waste for the pre-treatment plant, thank you, in Vogelsville, and pump it across the county to connect downstream into the Little Lehigh Interceptor project. This has a kind of a downturn to pick up flow from Spring Creek Pump Station as well.
Which we would be doubling in size.
And yeah, so addressing the undersizing of the Western Lehigh Interceptor through pumping rather than parallel.
Can what's coming off of Klein's Island handle what would be coming on the green alternative?
Yeah, it's the same flow. It's just a matter of how it gets there and how fast. So we would be pumping from here down. It might get to Klein's Island a little faster, but it's the same flow as if we went by gravity. And so there's likely some minor, smaller changes related to how a Little Lehigh Interceptor or Klein's Island would be managed to address pumping versus parallel, but essentially they're the same projects. So between those two alternatives, we have some somewhat refined cost estimates. And if we look at these across the chart, we have alternative 1 parallel, alternative 2 pumping. And these categories are the things that we talked about on the earlier slides. So Klein's Island projects, essentially they stay the same between alternative 1 and 2. Little Lehigh Interceptor changes a little bit between the two projects. The major change is between the Western Lehigh parallel, less expensive than the pumping, but there's some trade-offs to that we have to consider. Pre-treatment plan, I want to put a giant caveat on that. This is one big number that represents the Jacobs study that they presented to us. There's some pretty aggressive review of that going on right now with some value engineering and discussion with the industries, et cetera, to really understand where this number will land. But we view this as being a worst case scenario number. It will come down as we work through the reviews. The municipal I&I source reduction programs, these are the dollars associated with the plans that all 15 municipalities have submitted to us as the work that they're going to do over the 10-year time period. And then the flow challenged interceptors in each community, or the signatory systems, essentially the same, maybe a little bit reduced with alternative 2. I think the big takeaway that I want to say with these numbers is at this stage of engineering, $576 million and $587 million is basically the same number. There really is not a significant enough of a difference between those two numbers to say one's a clear winner in terms of cost effectiveness. And as the engineering, as we get into project delivery, the estimates will change, will become more refined as we do design work. But at this level of estimate, essentially it's the same.
Question, you'll probably get to this, but the alternative number 2 and the 97.6, we're essentially taking a new route.
Yeah.
And you somehow guesstimate land right of ways and land purchase that needs to be done and et cetera, et cetera. Somehow you do that.
Yeah, and there's also pumping facilities that are involved.
Yeah, all that, yeah,
Changes
all that.
the,
You pretty much have figured out a way to thread your way through the.
yeah, I believe, Phil, correct me if I'm wrong, or Jim, for the pumping alternative, we have a pretty clear route selected from prior work.
Yeah, it's called a windshield drive where you drive around, try to find the best alignment. So we try to stay in the.
You just drive around and look out the window and.
Exactly.
For the little Lehigh east of it along MLK and on the bike path to the south side of the river, we've walked that and we've made that next step.
Good.
And it's moved considerably from the windshield to work in the green line that you're seeing. That will move as well, but it gives you a general idea of where it's going. With regard to your direct question about land purchase, we've got a contingency line item in there, but until it's locked in, we don't know. These easements are always one of the biggest wild cards with any of these linear projects.
But there's a significant difference in the environmental impact of going
Yes,
the pump route versus along the stream.
for sure. We're gonna get into that too. This gets into the decision-making piece. So, essentially telling the story here that we have two options and they cost the same roughly. So how do we make a decision? And who makes the decision is really where we're at. And it's not an easy set of questions to answer. I want to, before I get off the cost slide, I want to make sure it's clear that these are capital dollars only in 2023 dollars. So as time goes on, the dollars will go up. And we have done present worth analysis and some review of O&M expenses, et cetera. It's not shown here. So we're really still trying to refine some of that stuff.
Just in regard to Phil's comment, so of just the alternative one. So of the $90 million, if that's somewhat successful, the inflow challenge interceptor work could be reduced in that cost, or is that what has to be done for the challenged interceptors?
I'll take it, then I can pass it to Jim. The $89 million figure that you see there, that was the signatory supplied SRP plans as they given to us in December.
Right.
And that may not be exactly the right plan to address those interceptors.
Okay.
That's the missing piece. They have to find the problem in those interceptors.
Okay.
Which that has not, to our knowledge, has not occurred yet.
So at this point, we think we need to do both. We need to do the source reduction programs and we need to do these interceptors. But if we can work with the signatories and help them, or maybe they have their own ways to do that, but to refine their programs and put the dollars to where it will actually change the outcome for those interceptors and those projects go.
I'm estimating that about 2/3 of that inflow challenge interceptors could go away with additional I&I work. About 1/3 of it is not going to go away. It's just pipes are probably too small no matter what we do. But each of those is, those previous slides where you showed those projects, it's dependent on what each of those signatories actually accomplish and how successful they are.
And some of that interceptor work is municipality specific. It just be one municipality.
Almost all of it is.
Yeah, that's okay. That's what I thought. Okay.
Didn't we originally give the municipalities a date that they were supposed to get back to us with that information?
Well, they gave us information and that's what went into the 89 or the $90 million of their source reduction program. So that's based on the information they gave us, and then we're remodeling it and refining kind of what else is needed to fully solve the problem and feeding that. So it's an iterative process to some degree. This is where we are right now. And there's a lot of things that will impact these numbers as we go through decision-making process. So certainly the signatory I&I programs is one of those things. So speaking of which, what are the factors that will influence the costs? And I put it into these three buckets as really the key decisions that we need to make in a pretty short period of time. Phil would like the decisions made by September 1st. Is that right? Timeline, but these are really critical categories of decisions. First is relating to life cycle costs and how we look at that. This goes into, I'll be a little bit repetitive about this on a future slide, but the gravity versus pumping and how that impacts what things cost down the line. So pumping, for example, is going to cost more over time because of the cost to pump. It might also cost more because of the need to replace pumps more frequently than you replace a big interceptor. So looking at all of that together may send us in one direction or another in terms of the decision. But the permitting and construction challenges are real too. So doing a parallel interceptor in the floodplain of the Lehigh Creek is sounds like a really difficult project. So there's a lot to weigh in there with that all impact life cycle costs and constructability. Level of protection is a challenging one because we don't know what's going to happen down the road in terms of climate change. We've talked about what happened in 2018 and 2019 with the rain that we received. We received more than double the amount of rain for a 12-month period and had just lots of system challenges. Is that going to be the new normal, or how do we plan for that in these projects? What we've done with these cost estimates and with the projects that were shown on the map is looking at a specific storm and our level of protection for that storm, which is Ida, which happened in 2021. But should we be increasing the level of protection for either more frequent storms or larger storms going down the road? That will increase the cost of these projects. And I say impact on short-term and long-term costs because we could potentially spend a little more on larger pipes, and it'll be a short-term increase in cost, but long-term it might be the right thing to do because we're not replacing them down the road because they're too small. So I'm trying to find the right balance with that. Retreatment plan is a huge puzzle for us to solve. As I mentioned before, we're doing the value engineering to understand Jacob's set of proposals and how could we get more bang for our buck with some of the projects or change the scope or sequence of the projects to address the issues more cost effectively. But even if we get that number down, we still have a problem of understanding how we pay for it and getting feedback from the industrial users and as well as the community is really very, very important because our current financial structure is not set up for us to be able to finance the project.
Did that number surprise you when you got it?
Yes. Yes.
That's a all-in number. So that's being whittled down.
But it shows you how the difference in the life cycle for mechanical components, right? 30 years is.
It was a surprise and it's kind of culminating two things at once with the capacity, the plant being at capacity. We knew we would have costs to expand the capacity, but then, oh yeah, the electrical system and the oxygen system, the tanks, everything, we'll need a whole new plant basically. So
those costs for all those different big ticket items, I mean, they're all shared differently. That's the other big thing, right? It's not like all 15 municipalities divide that up equally. One line, Klein's Island applies to everybody and other things might apply to one person, one municipality, 2, 3, 4, right? So that's the other question.
It's difficult because the existing intermunicipal agreements are silent on some of the projects that we're talking about. So even ones that you think might be straightforward, like a Little Lehigh interceptor, I'll just use as an example. You know, there's already interceptors in Allentown, so we just build another one or build a bigger one, et cetera. But there's really not a lot of guidance that we can take from the existing agreements about how we share that. We have to get everyone to the table to agree on how we share that project and all the projects really. Pretreatment is just a little more specific and difficult because it's in the upper end of the system and there's you know, the industries there that have to weigh in heavily on it because it's, you know, they may have other options if our cost goes up.
It also has a very positive impact on the operability of Klein's Island because of the job it does for reducing the loads to it. So if it goes away.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Then, you know, it's a very complicated set of variables here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when we acquired the pretreatment plant in 1990, or I'm sorry, in 2009, the county had financed it. And so for whatever reasons and however their structure was, they financed it and then turned it over to LCA debt-free. And the rate structures with our industries don't accommodate major capital improvements. They accommodate the regular stuff like the projects that, well, actually, I don't know that I think I flipped the slide too quick, didn't give Chuck a chance to talk about pretreatment, but we have about $6 million in the 5-year plan for pretreatment. And so the rates will accommodate that, but not $200 million. So how do we finance that with the current revenue streams or new agreements that we need to develop? And these are big decisions. There's lots of smaller engineering decisions that I say small, they're multi-million-dollar decisions, but they're more at an engineering technical level of bioactive flow versus parallel, you know, types of decisions about what goes on at the treatment plants. These are the big ones though that will impact our cost. Some other major considerations. I put gravity versus pumping again because I think it's important to just understand the different components to that decision. You know, it's cost, yes, but it's also, you know, green goals related to green energy, et cetera, carbon footprint, ease of construction. On one hand, the environmental concerns of working in a floodplain versus social considerations of tearing up 12 miles of roadway for 3 years or however long it can take to construct this thing. There's a lot that goes into that decision.
We need a dictator.
Well, we're gonna put together a rubric for comparing all these things and balancing them out, and hopefully that'll help whoever the stakeholders are that will make the decision on these, balance these things out and weigh them out. Almost everybody's got a first, you know, shoot from the hip type of opinion on this, but put the numbers together and hopefully that'll drive it.
Is the gravity line that goes through, the part that goes through Allentown, is that south of the creek?
Both. Yeah. Right now, the alignment we've got picked, it actually starts at the Robin Hood Bridge, just south of the Robin Hood Bridge in the park. So if you think where Park is, go about a 1/4 mile upstream, crosses across the river from where it is now into the meadow, comes back across and runs on the south side of the river till we hit, you know, it's either 8th or Lehigh, I forget which, and it goes over to the wire mill, Arboretum, and then runs back through there and then comes back underneath of the Jordan Creek and into the plant. Right now, that's the best alignment we found. There's still, that's, you know, we're going from windshield to walking through the pucker brush to look at it. We still have to do geotechnical, easements, wetlands, bugs and bunnies, arrowheads, all that kind of stuff that push you left, push you right before it's locked in.
Those are the technical things that go into the
Yes,
decision.
exactly.
And there's another component that we're, you know, trying to begin to open the door toward public input and, you know, trying to understand the impacts to specific communities or even specific homeowners along the way. And then, you know, the political nature of doing these.
That's what we need a dictator, just somebody that.
So interestingly enough, LCA is in a very strange position with I have a slide on that, a whole slide on that. Our role in making decisions is not super clear. Anyone's role in making any of these decisions is not super clear. So we're trying to do it all together, but eventually we're gonna have to write the plan and say, this is what we're doing. Getting to that point is. Let me get through these things first, and then we'll get into that decision-making piece. So the gravity versus pumping, I think we've hit on that quite a bit. The opportunities for collaboration on the I&I programs, that's really something that Phil's been trying to wrestle with and helping the municipalities develop their plans to be as successful as they can be to address the problem areas. And we've begun talking and receiving a pretty warm reception from some of the municipalities about doing things like joint contracts and potentially even standardizing some of the methods for repair work. I know Phil is really wanting to have a centralized project tracking approach, so we can see collectively what I&I work is being done throughout the whole system, not just municipality by municipality. And then again, with cost sharing, the new agreements, the rate impacts, all of that still has to be worked out. It's quite a bit.
I like your design.
Let's see where there's tears coming down.
It's either me or Phil, I'm not sure.
Eddie. Tear.
That's definitely Phil. So some LCA specific things. One of the reasons we wanted to have this conversation today is to start to get feedback from the board on some of these things. I know, how do you do that, right? So I wanted to share at least my thinking on what our role is. It's very unclear, as I mentioned before. So the Act 537 plan is a municipal driven plan. It has to be adopted by the municipalities. LCA is not a municipality. So technically, we don't even have to vote on the thing. I think we will. I believe we would like to do that, and that would be consistent with prior approach with the interim 537 and things like that. But really, it's each of the 15 municipalities served that has to adopt it. And then it becomes part of their municipal plan. So it's very, very strange for LCA to be in a leadership position of trying to put this all together when we ultimately don't get to vote on the plan itself.
Because remember, the DEP put us in this position. They said, LCA, you're doing the plan on behalf of the system.
I think it's a position we want to be in. We're the regional entity that's operating in Allentown, and we own the interceptors and all of that. So it's appropriate that we're in that position, but ultimately we don't vote on it. And furthermore, the growth projections Norma asked about, they're not coming from us. We don't manage growth. That happens again at the municipal level. So there's a lot of municipal decision-making that happens that impacts the plan. But ultimately, LCA is going to fund the program. We're going to implement the projects, and we're going to pass the costs back to those municipalities through the agreements that we need to write. So all of the projects that we're talking about will eventually come back to this board for an authorization for design phase and construction phase and all that good stuff. So
Hence why we have to be in agreement as to supporting the plans.
yes. Yeah, I agree 100%, and I think it would mean a lot to the municipalities, some of the municipalities that we serve, to know that the board is, the LCA board is behind the decision making that is going on in those meetings, and they're aware that we're having this conversation today and what we're presenting.
You said vote on the plan. What do you mean?
So the approval process requires a resolution of each municipality saying that they have adopted this 537 plan, and that resolution has to go with the plan.
So is this,
Oh, or is it an ordinance or resolution?
Resolution.
So it's all or none, or is it?
Well, so the feedback that we have from DEP is that all is desired. We should be pushing toward all, but if it's not all, DEP will deal with the ones that aren't in. So if borough XYZ or township XYZ can't get behind the plan, we don't have them approving, but the other 14 do, then DEP will have a conversation with us collectively, but also with that township or borough
So there is a hammer someplace.
somewhere. Yeah, and there's nothing saying that DEP will approve the plan that we submit, but if we all agree to it and we're all committed to it, it certainly would make it harder for them to not approve it. So I have just a kind of a broad question here of how the LCA board would like to weigh in on these decisions. You know, if there's a method or an opportunity you'd like to have, or a subcommittee, or you know, we're presenting more technical details and asking for a specific set of feedback. Just wanted to kind of open that question to you if you have any thoughts on how we make some of these big decisions and how the board weighs in on these decisions.
Oh, my big mouth first. It seems to me that to get this done is so complicated. You talk about a Rubik's Cube here. There's so many inputs, and whether the public gets a hold of this, I can't even imagine how that's all gonna be managed. Who manages that? Does LCA do that? Does the county do it? There's so many questions I have. The question seems to me is, what's the best, most efficient way to get this through and approved? And are we the best ones to do it? We'd be in the planning of it, all that, but in terms of getting the public face of all this, should it be LCA, or is there some other organization that's better than that? Or is it just impractical?
We're clearly the only place it all comes together.
True.
It's not, let's look at DEP, you know, DEP take over.
How about the county? Did the county have any?
You're talking about the public input process. Well,
yeah.
let me just slip forward to that one, because I do think personally is my would be my goal or my opinion that we should be getting public feedback now, because that will help us to be able to understand those social, environmental, you know, what's really going to drive a community to say, yes, I can support this or not. It's probably who comes to their meetings and, you know, it's input. So I would suggest or recommend that LCA be in the driver's seat for collecting public input and working with the municipalities and the other stakeholders to do that. Started working one-on-one with the various stakeholder groups or the organizations like the county, LDEC, the Planning Commission, even our industry group. You know, lots of folks like that have now, I've now been able to have one-on-one meetings with to get feedback. And you know, not to make light of it, but essentially the feedback I've gotten from all of them so far is, oh, you got a big problem, don't you? You know, they want us to be able to present what the solution is, but they understand the importance of the decisions, and they understand the importance of the regional approaches that we're trying to talk about. They'll get behind us, but they're not going to lead. So I think it's important that LCA leads in terms of presenting and sharing the information with the communities and getting feedback from the public.
Well, my experience with these over the years has always been whoever owns the plant, whoever the plant's leased to, whether it's an authority or a private operator, they hold the NPDES permit to operate the plant. They take the lead in all of this, and then they have to deal with it, bring everything together, just as LCA is doing. That's traditionally the most effective concept and approach.
So, and not to forget about our partners at the city of Allentown. They're very involved in all of our meetings and the planning of the meetings. So they're absolutely partners. But they're a municipality, and they have interests that are a little more specific. Not that LCA doesn't have interest, but we are trying to act more as the regional collaborator. And the city may have some interest that they need to specifically advocate for. So,
The other thing I've always found kind of odd is that this whole planning process is adopted by the municipalities, but when a planning module comes in for a big, huge development, the municipality signs off on the collection, and then LCA or some other authority out there signs off on conveyance and treatment. So it's kind of a mismatch of things. I'm not sure why the Act 537 is just municipal, and then the other parts of the program, when you implement it, the planning aspects or authorities are always involved. So I just don't quite get that whole concept.
yeah.
That's the way it is.
One of my concerns, obviously, are the lines coming in to the city. I would like to see a better map of both the pumped line and the gravity line to see exactly what they're.
Just go by your house, you can send it, go by your house.
We're far enough from the creek.
They're gonna drill underneath your
But I mean,
house.
both lines, I just can't envision them on that map.
Yeah, that's definitely a high level regional map.
Right.
We could,
I just like to see it.
It's only 21 miles.
so on the public input side of things, what you're asking for is, I think, helpful feedback, because for the community, I'm kind of jumping down 6 bullets or so, but the community forums we'd like to do, them kind of maybe 3 or 4 of them kind of geographically, so that we can show more of the detail. For example, we do one in Allentown. We're going to want to show more specifics about that little Lehigh interceptor and where the connection points are, what communities they run through. Do some big posters to show people what that looks like. We probably want to do one out in Western Lehigh somewhere for the the Upper Macungie, Lower Macungie crew, and et cetera. So,
And if we're gonna approve it as a board, we should know that.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Just to quickly on the timing piece, I'm envisioning, if everything goes as planned, that the little A interceptor won't start till 2029. So, it gives us 5 years. This is how I'm envisioning it. So we gotta do stuff at the plant first. All the pre-work can be done while the plant stuff is going on, and then breaking ground. Breaking ground 2029.
The project's implementation timeline is something we'll need to present as well, but these community forums have to happen now.
Yes.
So that we
That's
have
what-
buy-in for the plan that we're gonna package for DEP. We'll have project-specific meetings, I'm sure, as we get into, some of these bigger ones. But to get from now to having a plan that we can actually ask the municipalities to vote on, I think it's important that we get some public input in between there. On the projects or on the approaches. So just the flow of what have been thinking through in terms of communication and outreach is we're doing the one-on-ones with the stakeholder, the key, some of the regional agencies now. The municipalities we're meeting with them monthly and more often. But what we'd like to do is start to get out to the municipal meetings and present where we are, what decisions have to be made, and just be open about what the unknowns are. We're not going to be able to present rate impacts now because we just don't have that figured out. But at least to set the stage for this is the level of costs we're talking about. These are the major projects that we're talking about. What are the drivers? And kind of do that somewhat continuously and be present at the municipal meetings so that we can share that. I think the term you like to use, Jim, is getting socialized to the impacts that are coming in projects and decisions that have to be made. Would like to consider doing I'm calling it a blue ribbon panel. That may be an overused phrase, but a group that would include some public and some regional people as well as some municipal, like a small group that can really dive a little deeper into the risk matrix that AECOM and Jim mentioned, and really kind of go through for this project, what are the key social impacts, the key environmental impacts, what's the public input going to be that we should anticipate, and get that kind of deep involvement with a cross section of the region. And then the community forums, we kind of come after we've gathered some of that initial feedback from the municipal meetings and the Blue Ribbon panel. And go out there with a roadshow, I guess, in early 2024. We need to be ready to write the plan in the summer of 2024 and have it ready to go out to the planning commissions by September.
Again, that's to hit the March 2025 date, so that slips and everything, you know, everything slips, that's, you know, quarterly.
When do you think you'll have some guesstimate as to rate impact?
We have them now. The Raftellus study that was presented a few weeks ago, that's preliminary. So as the numbers become a little more refined and we understand more about how we're going to share the costs of some of these projects, then the rate impacts will be refined even more. What we have now is like high level. If we take all of the projects and just share them equally, this is what it will be, and it fits within a general scope of what EPA says is affordable. So that's kind of step one.
This is a good plan. I like the sequence of things. I've done things like that in the past, so it's you're touching all the bases. I think that's good.
I think the public input piece is really well conceived. I still am intimidated by kind of, because you're not going to get everybody saying, oh yes, let's go to the left-hand side kind of a thing. It's going to be there multiple perspectives. It's the decision-making part that intimidates me. It's okay.
Well, you have to clearly define.
Who's the dictator?
You have to clearly define up front who is going to make that decision.
Yeah, so thanks for the lead in. Is it next week or week after? I'm losing track of time. September 7th.
September 7th, 2 weeks. Yeah.
Is our next meeting with the municipalities. And we have asked the municipal managers only to come and have it be a very specific targeted discussion about how we make the decisions, who makes the decision, and how much public input is needed for those decisions, so that we can kind of put this all down and say, pretreatment plant is this organization's decision to make, and and what the input is needed, or these projects have to be decided collectively. And how do we do that? We do that by a vote. We do it by,
Is it a weighted vote?
Yeah, we have to figure all of that out, and that's the topic of next week's major meeting. So sounds like the public input process laid out here makes sense, fits the right flow for you.
Give the other board members a chance to weigh in. Kevin, Mark, John, any thoughts? Norma?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll jump in. I think this is a great approach. I think oftentimes that there's a concern that too much public opinion kind of mires the strategy or the process. But when it's something this complex and weighty, I think the approach here is a unique one and will allow for a variety of input. I mean, I think ultimately it has to be more than kind of tacit acknowledgement from the municipalities that, oh yes, we want the LCA to manage this and move forward on it. And I think it goes without saying that it's certainly got to be more than just kind of the typical handshake agreement, because obviously we don't want to get further along in this process in a municipality to kind of prove to be a challenge. So I think getting everybody in a room, both public and those municipal managers, is a great idea. And I think how it's laid out here is clear and puts us on a good road ahead.
Chair, I would just add that in your dealings with the county, certainly there's key players that I wouldn't mind identifying to you. Liesl, you probably know the players, but a lot of times it's better just to just to get the feedback from a small committee or a subcommittee with key players that are involved in and knowledgeable of all the processes that you would be going through. Certainly, Mr. Mulchaney would be one, and Commissioner Brace would be another. So that would be my input there.
Thanks, Mark.
Yeah, going back, I forget Sean's comment, if you agree on something, everyone has to sign off on it. Put initials on it, and then you move on to the next step, so somebody down the line says, wait a minute, I'm not quite happy how we got here. Yeah, it's not enforceable, I would suspect, but if you really give buy-in and have people, I don't mean literally sign off, but somehow say, we've all agreed to this is the plan, and we're all in on this, and John Hancock and the date,
We've done a little bit of that with the signatory meetings, not recently, but maybe 2 years ago or so, when we really settled in on the flow triggered approach to the project delivery. We wrote a white paper and circulated it and got it redlined by everybody, and then kind of finalized it and said, this is the approach, right? And everyone said, yeah. So I think we'll have to do something like that.
We might do that.
Yeah, very good minutes. Yeah.
Lisa, following up on Ted, everyone knows that boards and councils change with elections. I agree with what Ted said, because if you're going to get something on paper today, the next election, you may wind up with, some council or board members who disagree or, have ideas of their own. When do we say this is it, we're not changing it, as board members and council members change to keep it on track?
Yeah, that's a great question, Norma. You just kind of sparked an idea too, that we probably should look at election cycles and where people are going to be in 2025 when we're asking everyone to vote on this thing. So we're going to be doing public input starting now through 2024, then writing the plan. At the end of 2024, it's going to go out for the official approval process. And are those the same people who looked at it a year prior? It may not be, but to answer your question more specifically, Norma, once the municipalities have approved it by resolution and it goes to DEP, then we're committed. And DEP will view that as an absolute commitment that we're going to do those projects.
Great.
Maybe okay, because if 24 is a presidential election, I thought the municipal elections weren't as many.
Municipal election is this fall.
Is it off? Yeah, it's an off
Next
year.
one will be in 2026 or 2025.
2025, so.
People coming in 2026.
Right, so that may work out okay. May have the same people.
Yeah.
When you ask them to sign or approve a resolution that actually read the plan or heard about the plan.
Right. That's a great point.
Yeah, really.
Lisa, I have another question. Many municipal boards, councils, many of the board members are not familiar with what we are doing, and I don't think have the background to. I don't want to say don't understand exactly the minutia of what we're doing. How are you going to present it so that when you do, it's done in such a way that they understand the magnitude of what you're asking them to sign off on?
I don't know yet. That's a great question. But I mean, I think there's a couple things going on here. First of all, my approach to presenting this today was to keep it simple and not get into the engineering weeds of how the plan was developed. And I think that as an initial approach with the municipalities is what's needed. But the second thing is that I'm not planning to go uninvited or unassisted to these municipal meetings. Certainly, township managers, borough managers, et cetera, city council, if the city would like me to be there, would be working with them more specifically on what do their boards know? What is their level of comfort with the engineering details versus their interest in financials, or what are the really major key points for each presentation? So I would expect some standard information that we'll present, and I would expect some tailored messaging as well based on the needs of each municipality.
Amir, comment? Amir?
I assume that whatever you have presented, the municipality, city of Allentown, they have been on board and you kept them up to date to this point. And this plan, it is a must. It's a mandate from EPA that we have to do. So I don't think so there is a question whether we should do the plan or not. I think the biggest concern that all might have is going to be on the cost, and suddenly everybody's seeing the rate increase. What's going to be, they might choke on that number. Do we have a sort of a tiered cost increase? Because not all the cost increase is going to be in a one lump sum. Is going to be over the next 10 or 15 years. Have we developed a plan? Because that's going to be, in my opinion, that's going to be the most important question everybody's going to ask. What impact is going to have on my rate?
Yeah, Amir, that's great, and really trying to understand how to present the unknowns about the rates, because we don't have all the answers today about how we're going to share the cost. But as the engineering work sort of wraps up and gets toward the end, we will know the sequencing of the project, so that so the timing of when the costs will come in, when we'll have to borrow, et cetera. So we can give kind of some conceptual views of how rates will be impacted before we know the details of how each specific project is going to be shared with each community. So yeah, we'll plan to put some of that together, and that is the work that Reptelis is doing for us.
Thank you.
Okay, any other board comments?
So just to kind of wrap up, there's a couple of other items. The first two about LCA's role and the public input is really what I wanted to cover today and get your feedback on. So I appreciate the dialogue on that. These last two are, I think, more for a future discussion. How do we draw a conclusion on the pretreatment plan projects? We need more feedback and review on that before we could even ask you to weigh in on that. How we implement the projects, what's the staffing or budgetary need for us just administratively or structurally for LCA to be able to handle the project load that's coming. We have to put our heads together about that and present something for discussion on that. So I think a lot of these I've already covered. This is the next steps, really the remainder of 2023. The public input process and the decision-making process. That's the meeting that we're going to have next week and start that conversation with municipalities, kicking off the public communications and input process. The decisions that have to be made this year relate to pretreatment plant, gravity versus pumping, and level of protection. Kind of in broad terms, those are the three big ones. We need to get closer to that financial analysis that you all have asked about, and Reptelis is on schedule to complete the current phase they're working on in January, so that'll be good timing before we get out to public forums. And then really just prepare ourselves to start writing this thing and pulling all the details together. That's our push for the remainder of this year. Phil, anything else you're working on with those besides those 5 things?
That's enough.
Your time.
I would just add one comment. I think that just to follow up on what Amir said, the Act 537 plan requires the projects, and then, they want the implementation schedule. I think that's really critical to spread things out and impacts the staffing levels, it impacts the financing, it impacts hiring consultants, everything. That really needs to be considered so that you're not trying to do everything in 5 years for the next 50 years, right? Which I assume we're not doing, but you know, anything that could be legitimately spread out and they'll agree to, you know, I think that really is an important piece of the project.
Really need to get a sense, I think, from the municipalities of like their pain tolerance.
Yes.
For-
You really get feedback from them, to
Yeah.
know your audience and kind of work your way back in.
Yes.
And so we spend time on the appropriate big button issues.
So I'm gonna take the presentation down so we can see everyone at once. The final alternatives analysis authorization for Arcadis is drawing to a close.
We were saying the end of October, yeah, we're in the transition period.
So we're on schedule with that side of things and really moving into that selection of solution phase, making those big decisions and
We're ahead of schedule.
we're ahead of schedule. Good job. That's all I have presentation wise. Happy to have more discussion if you'd like.
That's enough.
I second that.
Anybody else have any comments or questions? Not just me. It's a lot to digest.
It is.
Good job. Thank you.
Yep.
All right, including that, moving on now to monthly financial review. You have 5 minutes.
We could do the 1 minute sports.
Thank you.
You want the presentation or no?
Yeah, put it up. We'll touch on summary months, summary year to date. The clock ticking.
And go.
All right, summary for the month will be in the next one. Actually, mixed for the month in terms of positives. We had one negative with suburban wastewater, the other 2 were good. Actually, I'm happy to say all 3 were better than forecast for the month. Same thing on the cash flow statement. Wastewater was on the negative side, but water and city were positive. But all 3 were better than forecast for the month. Year to date, we got all positive numbers year to date. We got all positive variances on income year to date. So that's all good news. On cash flows, we're in the same position. We got positive numbers for year to date on cash flow, and actually we are better than forecast across the board. Full year forecast, we have not changed the forecast much. We're gonna roll what we have Q3 into the budget. We've already talked about the income problems in suburban wastewater. City is just down because of depreciation. So the cash flows all look good compared to the budget as we look at Q3 forecast. So just a good minute, so we can go right next to the scorecard. So just looking down the line, suburban water, 14 out of 14. Suburban wastewater has been 9, they've hovered around 9, 10, getting dinged a little bit because of that budget issue. And then the city, you've got 13 out of 14. So the underlying metrics in terms of debt service coverage ratio are good. The operating ratios are all fairly good. And cash on hand is all good across the board. Just executive summary, again, the net income and cash flows for the month were better than forecast. Year to date, they're also better than forecast. Financial position with respect to the budget is about the same as it was. We have and the only other thing, year-to-date operating revenues across the board, all favorable to forecast. Operating expenses, favorable across the board on a discretionary basis. Got higher interest income still coming into play. And some of the ongoing factors there, we still are seeing some inflation, we're still seeing the higher interest income. We saw no erosion on suburban water borrowing, that's all good. And because we're holding on to some investments, suburban wastewater cash position looks pretty good. How'd I do?
Did very well, yes. you have anything else to offer?
No, I think we're in a
Give you
good,
that opportunity.
I think we're in a good position with respect to budget. I think we're in a good position with respect to the forecast that compares to budget. Underlying metrics are still strong, so at this point in time, I'm comfortable saying that we think we're gonna finish is we should be able to hit that or do better. And next, we will roll into the budget.
All right, thank you. Any questions? Moving on to monthly system operations overview. Digital board package, pages 88 to 89. And the July 2023 report was attached.
All right, thank you. I don't think I can spit mine out any faster than that, so let's go at normal speed. So in front of you, you have the July operations report. The water production and wastewater treatment were pretty in line with what we typically see during this time of the year. However, we did get 6.27 inches of rain. The PADP still does have us in a drought watch. And as we move down a little bit further, with all that rain, we did have 2 bypasses. I'll touch base on them in a few seconds. There was 1 main break in Allentown. And there was 1 injury accident, and that was an employee got his finger pinched in between hosing for one of the back trucks while working out in the field. For the bypasses, they were both at Heidelberg Heights. The first one occurred from July 9th to July 11th, which was a little bit under 82,000 gallons that was bypassed. And the second one was from the 16th to the 18th. And that one was right around 107,000 gallons. As we flip over to the other side, as I mentioned, the 2 bypasses in Heidelberg, they also were related to the 3 permit exceedances. There was some loading exceedances as well as a little bit of a chlorine residual instance during those high flow events. Sand Spring, we do have 2 permit exceedances. They were both related to ammonia exceedances, which goes back to the project, which we're trying and hoping will show improvement with that. And we also did have 2 fecal instances at Windward. No boil water advisories in Central Division or Downtown Division or any of the satellite divisions. Happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, quick dumb question. You talk about inches of rainfall. This, of course, this is a prior month, but it seems the rainfall has been so isolated in these cells that are all over the place that you wonder how you say, well, somebody, I guess, is it the airport? I don't know where
We used the airport.
Yeah, but I know some of these storms have been so localized that,
Yeah.
you know, it's like, gee, how do you get any rain and they had 4 inches? So just a comment, it's just kind of crazy.
Yeah, we definitely see that. And just for example, some of these on here where we did get an excessive amount of rain at Heidelberg Heights, some of them we barely got anything.
Yeah.
Down in Allentown.
Unusual.
Where was the Allentown main break?
That's Chrisette off the top of my head. I don't have.
I have to think about that. There's been a few since the last month. I can't recall off the top of my head.
Okay, any other questions?
I have a comment.
Go ahead, Nora.
On the main breaks repaired, I noticed that in 2022, we had a total of what, 49 main breaks repaired? And this year so far, we've only have 8. That's a good sign, I guess. And sanitary sewer overflows, 2022, we had 18, and so far we've had 9. So I'm feeling good that we're doing better.
Thank you, Norma.
Quick questions. Andrew, have you ever tried safety stand down at the LCA?
Safety stand down?
Yes.
I don't know if I'm familiar with that.
Okay. When the incident, OSHA recordable started getting out of hand, the whole, the whole system, that they pick a date, they sit down and they look at the reviews, all the procedures and process that they have in place, try to review them and recognize and try to identify why is the root cause of all this recordable, and how, bring awareness of safety to everybody. I do recognize that we have working on the safety programs, but the rate that our incident going is sort of calls for different actions. So that's something that I would just put on the table to you guys to think about, that most of the organization, when they have this rate of safety, they go through the safety stand down to bring awareness to the safety and see how they can stop this incident.
You got that, Andrew?
Yeah.
Basically, you pull everybody in and you talk to them about the incident and make sure everybody's very aware. Okay, Amir, thank you. Sean, you have a question, comment?
Yep. Just a quick question. I know it's going to be in next month's report, so I don't need to belabor it. So could you give maybe a 10-second overview of, I think it was this past week in Emmaus? I know there was the boil water advisory, just what the cause of that was.
Sure. You want me to do that, or you want? I mean, it touched both of us. So ultimately, there was a 10-inch main break that was the primary feed from their storage facility. And what happened was the outer portion that we serve is up a hill. So we lost pressure to those homes that were on the upside of the hill. The homes in the downtown part of Emmaus didn't necessarily lose water the same way that our outside customers did.
And just to add to that a little bit, we do base a lot of our information off of customer calls. So when a customer calls and they say they have no water, it's way different than having a little bit come out. So we do try to clarify exactly what's going on at that customer's house. And we did have several customers call in with absolutely no water.
At the very top of the hill.
So out of precaution, that's why the boil water advisory was issued in our sections.
Thank you.
Linda, Elm Court. It was out on Elm Court.
Okay. Thank you. Moving on to staff comments.
I have just one, wanted to share that at the upcoming Pennsylvania Municipal Authorities Association meeting, which is going to be in Poconos in September, Dick Bonner is going to be receiving an award for his 50 years of service from the MAA. He is unfortunately not able to attend the award ceremony banquet. So I will be there. I'll receive the award, and maybe we'll have him come here and join us for lunch one day so we can give it to him. So just wanted to share that with you.
Nice to see you.
Yeah.
All right.
That's
Anything
all.
else? All right, solicitor comments?
No comments.
All right, public comments on any topics?
No, thanks, Brian.
Yep, no comments.
Thank you. Any board member comments? All right, then we are going to adjourn this meeting and go into an executive session to discuss security matters.
Yes, and for this one, we didn't set up a separate meeting for it because it's literally going to take 3 minutes. So we could just ask any non-board member on the Zoom to take your lead.